All right, nothing like starting out two in the negative. Neither Erica nor I have South African accents, so that's a minus. And then I don't think either one of us is referred to as the 007 of our industry. So I don't know what someone has to do to get there, but Jay can help me out with that later.
Well, I certainly was thinking to myself.
Maybe you are.
Oh, Quentin's one of my predecessors at Cadrian, and I was thinking, he's 007. And when people, often when you join a new company, people will say, oh, so you're the new person or the new Quentin, for example. I'm certainly not a Bond girl, so we'll start with
008. So listen, when we pulled together, wanted to mix it up a little bit with our panel. We wanted to bring, as we've all done these and sat in the audience, and the best thing we can do is bring as much real-world perspective about, what is working around this through the lens of this word called programmatic, and then what is not working. What is some of the pain that each of us sort of see and experience from where we sit within the ecosystem. So that was some of the goal, and then we'll round off at the end a little bit of what we see coming in the next year or two around where we see going forward. So with that, Erica is the EVP with Cadrian, the new Quentin George, the new and improved Quentin George, and MD here in North America. And maybe just a quick introduction around background, sort of how that's evolved, and current day responsibility. And then I'll do the same for a couple seconds, so we can just dive in after that.
Excellent. So hello, everyone. Really pleased to be on this stage. I've just recently joined Cadrian in January. So prior to that, I was living in the UK for 8 years, working with Dentsu Aegis, first on search, which I think is interesting, because when programmatic started to come into play, obviously a lot of search professionals were aware of, oh, this could be the new way of applying meaningful metrics to display. Yep. To start. And so that's sort of how I got myself into the programmatic industry and helped Dentsu Aegis with the growth and development of their programmatic offering, which is MNet. And prior to that, in the US, working on search engine marketing as well. And in the early days, my first digital career was media planning and buying on the digital spectrum. So calling up Yahoo and asking for the best rates. And we certainly have come a long way since then.
Yeah, so bring that to today for Cadrian, and having seen, especially from a more global perspective, both MNet develop as well as now Cadrian today. So a trading desk, yes or no? What does that mean?
That's a bad word.
Bad word, okay.
Unfortunately, it's a bad word. And yeah. I think we're probably not the only ones trying to disassociate ourselves from that terminology. I think, programmatic is here to stay. Yep. So that's the first thing. I think trading desk was an easy vernacular for everybody to latch onto, but we've grown and evolved, and we believe that the industry needs to continue to grow and evolve beyond what people perceive to be smoke and mirrors and lack of transparency. We're investing in how we partner with technology companies to drive those better business outcomes for our clients, to innovate and to apply data. And the whole aspect of just being a trading desk puts us too much in a finite spectrum. I think what it also misses out on is the fact that we're a people-driven business as well. So we could use all the technology in the world, we could have the best kit in the world, but we don't have good operators.
Yep. There's a people element left.
So
coming back, maybe just define programmatic.
Before we do that, you should introduce yourself.
I'll get there. Yeah, good point. So Jason, Kelly, work at Millennial Media. I run our media division. We're grouped into Millennial Media, been in mobile for 9 years, we reorganized the company both within our media practice that we've been in for some time, so working with advertisers and agencies around executing their media within mobile. And then also we have our platform business, which through our acquisition of both JumpTap and NextAge afford us the opportunity to aggregate inventory both in-app and otherwise, and then make that available to Cadrian, which is not a trading desk, to be able to buy on effectively across mobile. Spent a little bit of time in the space prior, ran a buy-side DSP, worked at Google through the AdMeld acquisition, so spent a little bit of time on the platform side. And then my last role, Time Inc. as a publisher circa 2009, which I think there's a couple in the room from back then. So interesting to see just how that has evolved even since then from a publisher standpoint. As well. But the term programmatic, a word many of us in the room have come to love and hate, or maybe both in that regard, given how widely it's used and thrown around the industry. I pulled up the Wikipedia definition this morning, and I thought this is a good tweet-worthy comment if you're on the Twitterverse. If you go to Wikipedia, it says this, I sort of got, it says, it has been suggested that programmatic media is a fast-growing phenomenon in the global media and ad industry. So I don't know how that gets edited, but the fact that it's a suggestion and not necessarily quite there yet.
Wikipedia perceives it not to be a reality.
Not quite there yet. No, we're getting there. So programmatic. So data, platform, and inventory, and the people. I guess can you speak to that a little bit more on how you define that and make use of that capability?
Sure. I think the core thing is data at its core, right? And Quentin referenced it as well, that there's still a lot of talk around big data, and that's all well and great when you start talking about the volume of data that's accessible, the volume of data, and the ability to store it because it's a lot cheaper for the storage and to assimilate that data. And I think that's where often our clients will come to us and say, oh, well, we want to build a DMP, or we want to think something about data. Or I was at a conference, CMO will say, I was at a conference and I was sitting next to another CMO, and they're both kind of comparing how big their DMP is. And that's great if its size matters. But
another good quote for Twitter. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to get all of our comments.
We're good.
But I think the thing is it doesn't matter if you have a lot of volume of data. Yeah. It's about making sure that you're pinpointing precisely which data is going to be meaningful and which data is actually going to help you generate better results or enable your partner in the programmatic space to generate better results on your behalf. So even, we've got a conversation coming up with a client in a few weeks' time, and they've sent us a laundry list of all their data points. And I just kind of read through it on an email while I was on my way to the office, and I thought, okay, there's only probably about 2 that we would care about integrating. So I think data...
What are they? What kinds of data?
CRM data is absolutely important.
So advertiser first-party data?
Exactly. Especially if they have engagement or constant sort of conversations that go on with their customers. Because I think that's untapped. Often people are looking for new customers when you could be cross-portfolio selling. And that's where the CRM data and targeting comes into play really easily. And I think the other really interesting point is talking to clients about point-of-sale data. So,
shopper marketing data?
Exactly. So for me, those are the 2 most meaningful data points. Now, of course, it's going to depend on the advertiser, but I would say that wager that those are the most important pieces, the owned and operated data.
That's great. Yeah, I would agree. So we'll have clients, we'll have advertisers or agencies come to us and say, same thing. I've been at a conference, I read about it, or it comes down from the CMO into the organization. I want to move to 100% programmatic. And we'll pause. That's fantastic. Our business is set up for that. We're like, oh, that's great. But let's pull back, define what that means with our partner, talk about all of the implications, some of the best practices around that, and have found that not many have moved to a binary approach where it's media, sort of, call it traditional media in that regard and how that is transacted, and then something more completely 100% automated. It seems to be a bit of a continuum in that regard, where some people are leveraging both practices or capabilities, or how do you find that with your clients?
I think, obviously in the history, and being in the programmatic space for as long as I have been, and being a business leader, so obviously it's our objective to drive the business. I would be cheering on the inside when a client says we want to go 100% programmatic, but I never like to take anything at face value. And really the question is well, why do you think you should be doing that, right? And just like they would say, I'm going to spend 100% of my budget on television. Well, why are you saying that as well? Because I think that's what we really need to uncover is what is that right balance? Anything that we can transact in an automated fashion that's data-driven and leveraging the right platforms is absolutely fantastic, but only if it's going to drive those right business outcomes. Otherwise, it's just an exercise in futility, because if it's just doing an apples-to-apples comparison between traditional methods and new methods, that's not necessarily going to be beneficial to anyone.
And for composition, just how many different clients, roughly, order of magnitude, do you work with?
Well, so we partner up with all of the wonderful agencies that sit within the media brand spectrum. So
mandatory have to say that? Wonderful? Was that
no, I just think it's important for us to articulate that, because they are partners, right? And that's also why we think we're different than other programmatic offerings within holding groups is because of our partnership approach. Of course, there's an investment strategy that goes along with that, but if we want to be putting the client first, then we need to be partnering well together. So Initiative, as well as ID Media and BPN are all of our agency partners. Yeah, exactly. Some of our largest clients are also the largest clients that media brands have within their portfolio. So Chrysler, US Postal Service, L'Oreal. I'm just trying to run off the gamut of them. Applebee's, I mean, it runs the whole spectrum between CPG, automotive, and retail.
Okay. So to build on Quentin's grouping, which I thought was a nice way to look at it in terms of, the first phase of, economics and workflow, stage one. Second, something around, effectiveness more for less, really having a common understanding of value. And the third then, building upon data, which you mentioned too, signals being most important. First-party CRM data, shopper marketing data. Where are your clients across that entire entire evolution? Are more in the third or the second or the first, or how would you group your client base?
Of course, I should be saying all my clients are super smart and doing fantastic things, but none of us would be in business if our clients knew exactly, if they didn't need the help and guidance of an agency to be successful. It really does run the gamut. And a lot of that is because programmatic has been niche, because trading desks have always traditionally been siloed into the back corner of the room, and who are those guys with 3 screens in front of them, Bloomberg consoles and such. It's a bit misunderstood, and also because it's been so pigeonholed into those little areas, getting people fluent about programmatic to then help bring programmatic to the table for the clients has been challenging, right? And we still know that our agency partners would like to learn more about programmatic. There are some clients who are tremendously sophisticated. So a significant amount of investment into programmatic, they're seeing sales outcomes and they know how to measure what those sales outcomes are gonna be. And that's really where we'd like to get with everyone. And then there are others that are just starting that journey. So it does run the spectrum of, I think I should try this programmatic thing. I've heard a lot about it. It's almost, everybody else is doing it, I should be doing it as well, to let's sit down and have a real meaningful conversation about data and how that will underpin everything else that comes into play.
Got it. Okay. Speak a little bit, then let's pick up on the measurement attribution piece. And I've even at Millennial, we all look at, half of us are on our mobile devices right now, if not more, right? So mobile is such a big, important part of our own lives and our own journeys as a customer, and an audience to be marketed to. But then when you go talk to and sit down with a marketer directly, and you talk about, okay, well, here's where this is the person you want to reach. Here's how we can reach them from a targetability standpoint. But still, some agencies and partners of ours are even running up into a little bit of a challenge of getting their clients across the board to sort of move dollars, quote unquote. Let's take mobile before we get into other channels. Sort of move dollars into mobile, representative with the amount of quote unquote time spent.
Right.
Do you see that challenge as well, and what will help get through that?
I think one of the challenges, and it would be a question I'd pose back to you first, is how do we define mobile? How does Millennial define mobile, right? Because, and we talked about this in preparation for this conversation.
100%.
It's been the flipping year of mobile for the past 10 years, yet it hasn't been taken over the line. So there is a fundamental problem with defining it perhaps as mobile, or the definition isn't precise. So, I mean, you guys have been in this space for quite some time. How do you guys define it for your clients, and how should we be thinking about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's that a quote when I got here last year to the company that we were in mobile before mobile was cool. Being in mobile for 10 years, imagine the type of technology flip phone that you're working with all the way through a 6+ today and otherwise. And I think the year of mobile happened. I think it happened without anybody really noticing it happened, and then all of a sudden just everything is mobile. And therefore, if everything is mobile, there is no mobile distinction.
Right.
And that's been an interesting conversation that we've had. So now you get into something that's about screens or devices or interconnectivity around that. So it's very much that more sort of intimate relationship that you have with that device, which transcends, I think, the word mobile, and I think it's almost limiting if you call something just mobile in that regard. So again, it is a mobile device. We are in the mobile business, but it's becoming much more than that very quickly. Next question. Yeah, that work? Check.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Check.
So measurement and attribution. How much can that help then?
Tremendously. I think measurement and attribution are important for two reasons. So we say, the great thing about programmatic or digital in general has always been its measurability and the ability to define what kind of outcomes it's driving. But I think we're often challenged with what is measurable and what is the best way to measure it. So I'll give you an example, and I think we've talked about this before, Jason, is we were preparing for a big client meeting with one of our automotive, not Chrysler clients. And my team said, we've driven X million lower funnel activity on behalf of our clients. So lower funnel being defined by you've either configured a car or you're going to be going to the local dealership. I was like, that's great. So what did that translate into sales? How many cars did we actually drive programmatically? And I think that's really where we should get. And the team's like, I don't know. And that's a problem. And that's why programmatic will stay siloed. That's why mobile will stay siloed is because you don't have that. It's not as translatable as the dealer being able to say, these are my weekly sales numbers. And we should really be tethered to that. So I think measurement has been far too much of clicks or eyeballs or any of those things. It needs to be much more in terms of what we're doing in terms of sales and driving client outcomes. And attribution is also an interesting, or what I would call sticky wicket. That's been bandied about a lot within our industry. I mean, it's been brought up already within the first 10 minutes of today's conference. And it's really important for us to start understanding that, and I don't think anybody is really there where they need to be. I think lots of people are attempting it, but from our perspective, we have to get attribution right. Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to get to the right mix of should it be 100% programmatic, or should it be 50% programmatic and 50% premium, but you can still deliver that at programmatic levels. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. Would you agree?
Yeah. It's, if you look at where we've been, I'll go back to circa early 2009, Time Inc., and as RTB and DSPs looking at buying media differently, it was coming back into the organization where we're doing sort of ad network optimization 1.0 with the likes of AdMeld and Rubicon and Programmatic and the like, and coming in and clearing large IOs, call it sort of private exchange or private marketplace deals, $1 million IOs from an Amex or a Digitas, where we'd bring that into the company and they'd want to clear it programmatic, quote unquote, programmatically. And it looked like I was a crazy person running around the building, like, what is that channel? What do we do? How do we figure that out? And now you have Time Inc. leading forward with programmatic print, which is fantastic to see them lean into that. And other programmatic out of home, programmatic everything in that regard. So I guess to set that up as a question, in a year from now, if we're back here talking, if Randa will let us back in the building or not, if we're back here talking, are we even talking about programmatic anymore, or are we just are we going to let that go as sort of yes, that's a word we don't necessarily need to focus on, and now it's something else? I
think we need to evolve the definition, and I was sitting here, and this is by no means meant to malign the purpose of today's conference, but it's Upfront Week, right? Yeah. And so from my perspective, eagerness to drive scale and to get wider adoption from a publisher perspective when it comes to programmatic. And so again, I'm still using the term, but thinking about how can I go and talk with my Magna Global, who's our unified investment arm, how can we go and talk to NBC Universal? Or how can we go and talk to ABC about how they could benefit from programmatic and those audience buying, delivering that option to buy on audience to their advertisers. I mean, 60 to 70% of upfront, budgets are committed upfront before we even know if the audience is going to be there. And from my perspective, that's really where we need to evolve. And so let's stop calling it programmatic. We could call it data-driven. Everybody's got their own permutation of it. But we need to evolve from it being a silo and kind of that kind of scary thing, the disruptive thing, particularly when it comes to broadcast, to listen, it's really about how we can leverage data to buy audiences that aren't inferred but are actually factual, that we know are going to drive new automotive sales or are going to move shampoo off the shelves. That's
great. That's a good synopsis. Devices. So we have a couple minutes left here. And a little bit of an industry, right, that sometimes can't get out of our own way, where we just can't flock to something new and improved. And so I see you have the Apple Watch on your wrist.
Go Gadget watch, which I wish it would respond to that.
That would be pretty cool. I'm surprised it doesn't. Quick thing, wake up the audience a little bit. Show of hands, I can see a little bit of the audience. is my favorite question to ask. Long or short? If you're long on Apple Watch, on the Apple Watch, or short. So raise your hand if you're long on the Apple Watch, if you feel it's going to be, wow. Okay, if you're short, if you think it's not going to resonate, yeah, more shorts than long by a significant margin. Interesting.
Very interesting.
How has it been for you?
Well, it's funny because this weekend, someone was like, "Oh my God, is that the Apple Watch?" And I said yes, and they said, "Of course you have it." So I am an early adopter, and I get particularly passionate about some of that early adoption when Apple came out with the first iPad. I'm not there yet, so I've had it for a week and a half. I've tooled around with it a little bit, but I also don't have a tremendous amount of time to configure the Apple Watch to my specifications. Yeah. It's the most intimate of devices, right? So if we think about our mobile phone, I'm very hesitant even to let my best friend or brother or sister touch my phone, because I'm like, you might read something out of context. For me, my watch is my most personal device because I've got my weight on there, I've got my activity monitor, my consumption, where I'm going to be, where I've been, and I think you could get a lot of that with your phone, but from my perspective, it's very intimate. And what kind of messages that you can deliver. We don't deal with a small screen on a mobile device, but this is the smallest screen now. How that really comes to fruition, I think we as marketers and platform providers really need to think differently about.
So 2 questions, and one from a consumer view. So talk about the level of data availability. Is that data that you would be willing to make available to marketers for the exchange of value?
Absolutely.
That type of intimate data you're talking about?
And I think we should allow consumers to be much more in control of their data and the value of their data and how much they're willing to surrender in return for the value exchange of better content or a better experience.
And then a year from now, will we be talking about you as a sort of media executive and running a team, taking advantage of that type of data to inform how you buy media and how you actually measure the effectiveness of it? So maybe there is some Apple Watch life in there after all.
I would think so.
That's great. Well, there's about a minute left. We'll end. I think we'll wrap it up with that. But everyone, round of applause for Erica, please. Thank you.